Earlier this month, or last month, I guess I should say, the New York Times pissed off a lot of people when it decided to hire Bret Stephens to write articles for them. Now, he is a longtime climate denier and conservative that they pitched as a different sort of voice, that this was about diversity of opinion and all that. I guess he denies the climate in a different way than other Republicans, perhaps. But anyway, people were mad, and now his first article has come out. We have had access to it, we've read it, and people are even more mad because the New York Times said that, look, we get that you're mad about this guy and he goes against 97% of all the climate scientists in the world, doesn't seem to have any credibility on this issue, but whatever, we'll have him, but we're gonna fact check him, okay? So if he makes a claim, we're gonna fact check it. Well, they didn't actually do that because he got a lot of fundamental facts stated in, he only stated a few facts in here and he got them wrong. We're not gonna break down all of them, but we do wanna read a little bit of his article because the core argument I find not just offensive as someone who believes in science and its ability to reveal truth in the world, but for someone who cares about climate change and our attempts to fight it. So Bret Stephens said this. His article, by the way, is Climate of Complete Certainty. He said, claiming total certainty about the science traduces the spirit of science and creates openings for doubt whenever a climate claim proves wrong. Demanding abrupt and expensive changes in public policy raises fair questions about ideological intentions. Censoriously asserting one's moral superiority and treating skeptics as imbeciles and deplorables wins few converts. And he's very worried that there are not going to be enough converts to people caring about climate change, I guess. Now he says after that, none of this is to deny climate change or the possible severity of its consequences, but ordinary citizens also have a right to be skeptical of an overweening scientism. I think there are a lot of isms going around that we should be worried about it. Scientism is not the one that I think that we should be the most worried about.
You're censoriously traducing that, so just
yes,
stop.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Okay. If you want to imply that someone's an idiot,
overwrittenism is something that I'm worried about in this culture.
Yes. Now look, there he's saying none of this is to deny science, and I get why he's saying that because he is a longtime climate denier and he's worried about possibly losing his job. So he wants to pitch himself now as what he calls a climate agnostic, as if one should be agnostic about whether our civilization is on the brink of destruction or not. But anyway, if you go back and look at his history, Vox had a couple of good quotes that they compiled. Stephens has previously called climate change a, quote, mass hysteria phenomenon. I've heard that before recently on other issues, for which, quote, much of the science has been discredited, and he as a scientist would know. He said that people who accept climate change science are motivated in part by a totalitarian impulse and they worship a religion without God. So that's not just climate denial. Yeah, and additionally he said global warming is dead, nailed into its coffin, one devastating disclosure, defection, and reevaluation at a time. If that is not climate denial, climate change denial, I don't know what is at that point. To say that it's dead and buried, and then, oh, you're just an agnostic about the most important issue facing humanity right now. So that's his position. I don't like the framing that scientists are absolutely certain about anything, when science, if anything, and especially scientists in the modern day, are marked by like this. It's drilled into you when you're in, like I was in academia, not one of the hard sciences, it was a social science, but that you should constantly question yourself, that you're constantly testing other people's hypotheses. Even if something seems to be shown by the data, it is continually retested. There is a humility that no other field, first of all, is demanded of them, and second of all, that they take upon themselves so willingly as science. And so to pitch it that they're absolutely certain about anything is 100% untrue. I don't know why New York Times didn't do their quote fact checking there. Now there's a little bit more to it, but I want to give you guys a chance to comment.
Well, first of all, just on that, and then Mark, just on that, science, ironically, there's an evolution in the way people think about science, yes. Even scientists, which people should think about. Also, Bret Stephens won a Pulitzer Prize when he was with the Wall Street Journal. And the letter that was written to the Pulitzer Committee by the editor at that time, I forget who, maybe it was Paul Gigot was the editor of the Wall Street Journal at that time, their editorial page, sent that letter to the Pulitzer Committee, did not cite any of his anything that had anything to do with climate change that he had written. He'd written a sheaf of pages on climate change, did not use any of them. So the Pulitzer Committee never saw any of his work on climate change. The Times hired him to do this, and it is it's such a departure from the way that most of their readership and most of the country thinks to go at science in that way. It's the Times really has to rethink the way that they do this, because it's like, you know, talk about fake news, right? I know it's an op-ed and it's opinion and all of that, but it's fake news, and the Times has been fighting against that label for so long.
And they're throwing their weight behind it. I mean, this is a much advertised position that the Times is now representing. When the truth is, John really stated it so well that you know, the facts are the facts, and there's certain facts that are not in dispute, and then there's certain facts that are being revised constantly as they are disputed by new facts that come in. All the graphs on the warming of the globe are undeniable. I mean, they're right there. It's such a steep curve up that to deny that would be crazy. Then you get into the, well, how much of it is man-made and how much of it isn't. But again, the science community is replete with examples of award-winning scientists, all of whom think that this is a man-made event.
Yeah.
And so, look, is it provocative and cool to take it on? Because I suppose that's
but why is it?
No, that's the part of this party that he's occupying, because there's no substantive part, factual part of the party that he's occupying.
Yeah, he didn't even cite an example of this supposed complete certainty. That's the whole article. There's no examples given of scientists showing complete certainty.
And part of what he talks about too, which is ironic considering he came from the Wall Street Journal, right, where they don't criticize anything having to do with Wall Street, generally speaking. That's not true, but you know, thematically they don't. He's saying that there's a moneyed part of this, that there's a moneyed interest in going, you know, out and saying that yes, there's man-made climate change. It's a huge problem, and then that's to open up the coffers of money. And Stephens is critical of that after having been at the Wall Street Journal for such a long time, where the rest of the world is criticizing the way that Wall Street operates, and now they're just going to go after scientists for saying, oh, they're in it for the money. Well, that's what's unbelievable. When people criticize journalists and scientists for being in it for the money, there's no patience for that.
They apparently haven't worked as one of those things.
Apparently not.
Those aren't big money industries, no.
Exactly, and to the Pulitzer, look, you can do great investigative journalistic work and be absolutely crazy on other issues. And this is not journalism. This is at best an op-ed that's poorly written and poorly researched. Now it's just one, maybe it'll get better. But anyway, yeah, and to say that that his main concern is that those scientists are so sure of themselves, and that's why they're saying we should spend an extraordinary amount of money, that we should damage the economy and limit growth to stop our hundreds of millions of people potentially having to flee rising ocean levels. He believes that. Okay, well, first of all, many people believe that investments in clean energy, renewable energy, and things like that could actually be a net positive for the economy. He simply asserts that it's a negative without providing evidence for it. Again, that wasn't fact-checked by the New York Times. But I've actually seen a big meta-analysis of the expected, if we were to pursue policies necessary to keep global increases in temperatures from going above 2 degrees Celsius extra, that it would limit growth globally by 0.06%. And for some reason, they can simply say it limits growth to scare people. I would easily give that if it means that we don't potentially have to face worldwide droughts and famines and things of that sort. But there's one other thing I want to show. Another meta-analysis. If we're talking about certainty and we're talking about what scientists think is likely to happen, the book Climate Shock had this chart. Now this is an accumulation of a lot of analyses of what the expected warming is and the likelihood of it happening. And so you're seeing there's no chance that we're not going to go up almost 1 degree Celsius, okay? Now we've already had since the 1900s, I believe somewhere between 0.6 and a little bit more than 1 degree raise in temperature. Now, there's a very high chance that it's going to be either 2, 3, or 4 degrees. That is a disaster by itself. You're looking at ocean levels going up, you're looking at some cities becoming uninhabitable, you're looking at some crops not being able to develop. That is a disaster. But then once you get towards the right, there's a very large chance, look, they've marked it off, more than a 10% chance of more than 6 degrees centigrade of warming. That is species threatening potentially. Now, if there was a 10% chance of you crashing your car if you got into it, would you drive? there was a 10% chance that in a routine surgery you were to die on the table, would you get that surgery? No, at the very least you'd get some insurance. And yet he looks at that sort of information and says they're too sure of themselves. I would say both the scientists and those of us who care about the continuation of our civilization are being far too timid. And yet he's the one getting paid at the New York Times.
And by the way, the coda to that is that they've historically been on the timid side. You know, all the forecasts about how warm the planet will get, you're constantly seeing we're getting warmer at a pace that's even faster than those projections. And you've been seeing that story over and over and over again for the last decade. So I think the scientific community is timid about making these alarmist forecasts.
Yeah, because unfortunately, this particular area of science has become incredibly politicized, and when they come out with their findings, they're either censored by the government, they're attacked by politicians and by pundits because they don't like what science has revealed. I would say if you don't like what it's showing, then enter a doctoral program, conduct research of yourself, have it go through the peer review process, and show that those other scientists are wrong. That's how you actually prove a point, not simply attacking them and asserting that some guy who went to school for 12 years at the doctoral or the graduate level is doing it for the money when he makes $50K a year afterwards.
Right. Podcast the Young Turks anytime you want. TYTnetwork.com/join.
I think it's weird.
No, it's not weird. In fact, you'll think,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
Do it now. TYTnetwork.com/join.